Hey guys, welcome back to more homeowner association stories. In this video, an HOA designated my property as a public parking spot, even though I am not even part of the HOA. Let's dive right into the story. And the title story starts like this. My house is technically one within an HOA boundary, but at the same time I'm one of the very few houses not obligated to be actually part of the HOA. This means I cannot go to meetings and do whatever the hell members actually do, but it also means that none of their rules apply to me and I'm free to basically do whatever I want with my property as long as it follows county and state guidelines. The reason I am an exemption to the rule is because my family ended up getting grandfathered into the property. For those that might not know, grandfather law for this kind of thing basically says that since I'm inheriting the property and it is staying in the family, I cannot be forced into any mandatory new homeowner agreements. The same way sometimes you see apartments being passed down and the rental agreement is not allowed to be adjusted. Since the house was in my family name before the HOA was formed and a mandatory rule to join was added, I was exempt from this. I had some neighbors that I speak to when we walk our dogs tell me that I was lucky and they wished they did not need to be part of the HOA and dealing with the extra money they had to pay and things they couldn't do with their property. Some were even jealous that I had a gazebo in my backyard and they were not allowed to build one because of this HOA. The only other thing I should probably mention about my property is that none of the lands here are small. They are not big farms or ranches, but enough land that you will never feel cramped. My dogs love running around the property and playing fetch. I had the peace and quiet of a rural area, but still it being a suburb where I see the people that live close to me on a nearly daily basis. Sorry if it seems like I'm bragging, but I promise I'm just trying to create a picture for you before I jump into this HOA story, and especially the president of the HOA. They get beyond angry about the fact that I'm technically not part of the HOA because apparently things I do give other people ideas and they get mad when they cannot do them. I tend to always deck my house out for several holidays which the HOA has banned and people get annoyed about it, pointing out that my house does it and it doesn't seem to ever cause a negative effect. In turn, the HOA hates me for no other reason than I'm getting to do whatever I want. The president has met with me several times, but closer to the event of this story has gotten pushier each and every time he approaches me. Each interaction follows a very similar pattern that I would just give you the highlights of. He tries and fails to be casual and makes small talk with me while I'm polite back to him. Then he brings up the benefits of being an HOA member and offers to allow me to join like he's doing me some kind of favor. And I decline, of course. Then he talks about how me not being a member makes this not seem fair for everybody else and that if I was a good person, I would join and be like everybody else. I declined again. Finally, he tries to make some weird agreement where I'm not part of the HOA and have no rights and don't have to pay dues. But I also would need to follow their rules and be subjected to fines. A deal that I'm pretty sure is not legally binding anyway, but regardless, I once again decline. He leaves angry and I don't really lose any sleep over it. They seemed harmless enough interactions, but again, as time went on he just seemed to get pushier and more entitled behavior seemed to leak out. He was clearly a guy that people didn't say no to, and I was getting on his nerves by wanting to just exist in my own life. He would complain about the things I did and that I was being selfish and actively harming the community and the property values by the actions I continued to take. I feel like I should mention that my house was put together, the lawn was kept and there was nothing about it lowering the value. If my house was some kind of garbage heap or flaming pile of tires, then I could sort of understand his side of things. Since that was not the case, I didn't, and I really didn't want to be in an HOA, especially if it meant I was gonna need to listen to this a-hole. I guess that at some point he got fed up with me refusing to join and figured that he could just find a way to get me so upset that I would move out and not be an issue anymore. The new owners would be forced into an HOA contract and he would win. It was also going to be a win-win in his mind because the HOA was now facing a problem. They decided for some stupid reason to ban parking on the streets, claiming it was causing too many accidents. Most people had more than one car and not really any space to put it unless they were going to park on their grass. By the way, I believe also it would have been an HOA violation. On top of that, they were getting more residents moving in and there was just a huge current issue of too many cars and not enough space to just put them. People were mad and the HOA told them that it would be fine because they were gonna build a spot where HOA members could park their cars free of charge. I only knew about this because the president came to me and started explaining the situation. Me, why are you telling me this exactly? President, I need you to allow people to park on your property, at least 6 months while we build a lot, maybe even longer though. Me, I'm sorry, what? You wanna have people park their cars just on my lawn? Taking up all my space and causing me to hear cars moving at all hours of the day and night? President, don't be so dramatic about it. Me, how much? President, how much what? Me, how much money are you offering me to rent out my property to use as a parking lot? President, we are not gonna give you any money. It's a free service for the HOA members. Me, then no. You don't have permission to use my property for anything, by the way. Goodbye. I closed the door on him, and honestly, even if he offered me money, the answer would have been no. He didn't listen and instead created signs and told everybody that my property was going to be where the free parking was. I destroyed the signs when I could, but some were not on my property and I was not legally allowed to just destroy them. I could tell people to leave, but it just didn't seem to work for the most part. They kept coming back, usually showing me a pass they got that was their proof that they could park there. Please don't blame the people in the neighborhood, by the way. A lot of them are older and I don't think they understood fully what was going on. I was speaking to a lawyer and had papers sent to the HOA telling them to knock it off or I was gonna take them to court. That was when I realized that they were claiming my yard was community space and I did not actually own all of it. Telling residents that I was trying to steal the community property for myself, making some people actually angry at me thinking I was in the wrong. Misinformation in the wrong hands can really spread like wildfire. To make things worse though, I had to leave for a weekend and it was not something that could be helped. I knew when I got back what I was gonna see and I was right about that. Over 30 cars parked on my property, but I was not angry because I actually had a plan for revenge against the HOA. I spoke to a towing company explaining the situation and they were more than happy to come in the night and remove all of the cars. They even had to work together with a competing towing company to fulfill my wishes. A big ask, but they knew each one would be a big payday for them once they got paid to get the cars back. They were legal tows since it was my private property after all. The aftermath of people realizing their cars were gone was hilarious. They would ask me what happened and I would remind them that they were told it was HOA property, so they should go and ask their HOA. Of course, as soon as one person tracked their car down, the rest did as well, and now everybody was angry at the HOA for getting their cars towed and demanding the HOA pay to get them back. As for legal action, once their lawyer got the documents that my property was private, there was no way he wanted to take things to court. Their lawyer spoke to mine and agreed to pay me for using my property as a parking lot for the last 3 weeks. A tidy sum, but the HOA was not done losing money or out of trouble yet. With everybody irate and hating them, they did not really have any choice but to get each and every car out of impound. At first, they tried to tell the people it was my fault, but at that point they had documentation from the towing company that they were illegally parked on private property and not HOA communal space. They were more angry that the HOA lied to them than the fact that I towed the cars, which was great news for me. The HOA president was left feeling extremely embarrassed, and instead of being praised as trying to help, he was now being labeled as an idiot and questions of if he should be in charge of anything arose. Eventually, he was basically bullied out of his position with the HOA surviving. He got knocked down off his high horse and the HOA learned that messing with me is something they should not try again. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you enjoyed this title story, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel since we are getting closer and closer to 130k subscribers, which is absolutely insane. And the next one is from the new subreddit r/ohnoconsequences. And it's basically a subreddit full of very satisfying stories. So my now ex-friend 27 female Sarah has been with her husband 27 male John for over 10 years. Now they are not legally married but call each other wife and husband. They have 2 children together and just last year in January Sarah got caught cheating on John. It has been going on for a few months. She doesn't have a license or car and he would drop her off at work and then she will leave with the guy afterwards. There will be times that she says she's with someone, but with the guy. When she got caught, they were separated for a bit. Once she found out he reconnected with his high school ex on social media, she went to directly message her and said that they are still together. He cheated on her instead. She cried to me about it and I did look at her like, What? I told her he only messaged that woman and you're already this hurt? Well, imagine how he felt when he found out you've been doing stuff with this guy. She promised everyone she wouldn't do it again. Fast forward to May, she got caught cheating again and this time he was done with her. They were still living together, so at first the new guy would park at the street to pick her up. It eventually got to the point that he was confident enough to park in front of the house. She moved out in June and that was the end of their marriage. On to October, Sarah found out he reconnected with his high school ex again and they are now dating. She went full on crazy and jealous mode. She told him, of all people. Why her? Well, she made up lies to the kids and everyone that he cheated on her with his high school ex. She was the reason why they broke up. During those times, she was trying hard to get back with John, but he would not budge. She made up all kind of excuses to talk to John, and sadly, she even stopped seeing her kids too. She would pick them up at least once or twice a month if they are lucky. Now, at this point, she was having problems with her new man. They were arguing every day and to the point that he hit her a few times and chipped her tooth. She cried again to me. She told me that she couldn't believe John would move on so quick. Lately, John has been so mean to her and was always on his girlfriend's side. She even said he loved his girlfriend more than he ever loved her. Now she even made me choose to not be friends with her. It was either her or John's girlfriend. Now, at this point, my husband is close friends to John and there was not much I can do. I told her, you cheated and messed up. You had it good with John, but because he wasn't what you wanted, you left him and your guys' kids. Now you found someone who hits you when John had never laid a hand on you. Needless to say, I'm glad my relationship with her are over. And the next one is titled, Freeloading relatives don't want to chip in on living costs, move out and now regret moving out. Also from r/consequences. So some of my relatives moved to the US a few months ago. My parents let one of the families, Uncle Ben, Aunt May and two cousins, Mary and Stacy, live with them. My parents live in a very nice walkable city. Their apartment is in a great location, close to public transit but in a quiet area. Unfortunately, it's also very expensive. My parents' apartment would easily cost $4,500 to $5,000 a month to rent where they live, so despite it being a tight living situation, it was really the only option currently for the relatives who just moved. They had basically no money, no credit, and their jobs would for now be limited to minimum wage jobs. We fronted the cost of their immigration fees, got them phones, found my cousins free English classes at a public library a 5-minute walk from my parents, got my cousins jobs at a Dunks that's about 1.5 miles away from the house and a 10 to 15 minute bus ride away. My parents found my uncle a job at a Dunks slightly further away, but still less than 2 miles. However, he could not get past the training. My parents continued to try to find him jobs, but it was taking more time than expected. Aunt May refused to work. Still, both the cousins had jobs, so they had some income. My parents found one of the cousins a job at a bakery, but she didn't like the hours. I got the other one an interview at a grocery store that would have paid more, but she missed the phone interview. And well, that's all to say, we were trying to get them jobs and doing our best to find jobs for people with limited English while also trying to set them up for future success via English classes, applying for various public housing and getting them some work experience. After 4 to 5 months, my parents approached my aunt and uncle about them starting to chip in for groceries and utilities, since the two cousins had been working for a couple months at that point. My parents went from having 2 people and a cat to now having 6 people and a cat to house and feed. My dad went from getting groceries 1 to 2 times a month to having to go to every week. My parents are not well off either. They live a frugal lifestyle and my dad was fortunate to buy the apartment they live in a long time ago, or else we would have been priced out a long time ago. Apparently, that was too much of an ask, so they said they will move out. Completely fine, since nobody was forcing them to stay and it was not doing my parents any favors. The whole time my relatives lived with my parents, my aunt and uncle would constantly mention that they had other family and friends in other parts of the US that would help them out. Where these family and friends were when I spent hours helping with their immigration applications, fronting their immigration fees and buying them phones to use in the US or even getting them winter clothes, I have no idea. So my dad said, fine, if that's what you want to do, then move out, since you don't want to pay us anything and have all these other people that can help you. Pretty much a week after the conversation about chipping in, they had someone from my aunt's side of the family fly from Michigan and then drive them 13+ hours from where we are to Michigan. Guess my relatives were correct in having other people that can help them. Before they moved, I suggested my uncle or my aunt and uncle go to Michigan first and see how it is before making such a big change, but he refused. We even found places in NJ where the cost of living was lower, they could have jobs and still be close enough to all our families for visits, but they refused because they didn't trust a family friend who lived in that area that offered to help. The reason they didn't trust this family friend is because he had the audacity to say that in order to find an apartment he would need them to put a deposit down for it. He wouldn't front it for them though. So once they moved to Michigan, they quickly realized their help there is more limited than what they had here, and it's not quite as nice over there. My uncle kept talking about factory jobs he could do out in Michigan, and he got one. However, it's not quite as cushy as he was imagining, since they are basically out of the home from 5 in the morning to 4 to 5 p.m. My aunt even decided that she now can work despite telling us no earlier. The area itself is not as nice and my cousins don't feel safe walking around. There's no good way for them to get around without a car, which they don't have. They are being nickel and dimed for everything that their friends over there are helping them out with. Not quite the same situation they had while living with my parents. So when my aunt and uncle called me, it's all complaints about how tough the work is, how his blood pressure is high, how my aunt cannot sleep with the stress, and that they want to move back closer. Even one time said something along the lines of, "I'm of course not asking you to help, but we are having a tough time here." The tone basically being one of expecting me to offer to help in some way. I've just said hopefully things will get better, because what else am I supposed to say? At this point, I rarely answer their calls because it will be just complaints and whining. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm absolutely amazed at how patient OP is with these entitled people. If you had such entitled family members, what would you have done if you were in OP's shoes? Let me know in the comments, I'm very curious about what you have to say. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Now, I had heard that HOAs could be a greedy nuisance, but I had no idea how entitled they really were until last year. My damn neighbor sold his 300 acres to a housing developer after he told me that he was selling to another farmer. I swear I could beat his ever-loving ass for this mess he caused. Anywho, the housing developer built a bunch of very nice homes, basically like small mansions on that land. I'll admit, I was pretty damn nervous about this neighborhood being thrown up behind my property. I could smell the BS that was about to be unleashed upon me and my family. Or rather, that I was about to unleash on them. You see, I have lived in this house on this land my entire life, and so have the 4 generations before me. As a matter of fact, my 94-year-old grandmother, who is lovely but less than lucid, lives with me, my wife and son, as well as my father and mother. Don't worry, the family house is pretty big. Sometimes she can be found wandering around in the garden early in the morning in her nightgown. My family has raised and sold livestock as our bread and butter since we owned the place. Our property is about 415 acres, give or take, my father would know. We also grew soy and corn on alternating years in the western field. But sorry, I digress. So the neighborhood took shape and fancy folks started moving in. Before I knew it, they had established their own homeowners association and directed their attention right at me for some reason. I had been working the fields and was getting ready to start seeding the week of their first letter. They were demanding that I remove the large tractor from my front pasture, claiming that it was an eyesore and that it could be seen too plainly from the road. I was pretty confused by this, you know, considering I don't live in their stupid HOA in the first place. How do they think they have any jurisdiction to come over and tell me what to do on my land? I wadded up the letter and threw it right in the recycling bin. It was only a few days later and I received another letter stating that they would fine me for $1,000 if I did not move the tractor like they asked. However, that was not it. Now they were also complaining about the smell that comes from our property, and well, that is cow poop for them. I don't know what they want me to do about it. My father said that we needed to call a lawyer, but I wanted to wait it out a little longer. That was until I, well, really Grandma, found them snooping around the south side of our property. She had been doing another one of her early morning strolls in her pajamas when she saw 4 people walking around and snooping about several of our barns. We had 2 tractors for different farming tasks parked back there as well. Now, I'm not exactly sure what happened, but according to my grandma, she asked the people to kindly leave our property and they told her to mind her own business and they had some right to be out there somehow. She did not take kindly to that and marched her ass in the house, grabbed my deceased grandfather's old wall-mounted rifle and proceeded to threaten these individuals. I found it hilarious and my grandma was awfully proud of herself because she got them to leave. She said that was what her husband would have done as well. While our family was entertained by my grandmother's ballsiness, the HOA wasn't. They actually called the cops, which I will remind you that we live in a small town and have done so for 4 generations. The sheriff responded to the call and funnily enough, it was a buddy of mine from high school. And he coached my daughter's Little League team, so needless to say, we knew each other. Sheriff Mark was quite amused by everything really and seemed to have a similar opinion to mine. We owned this land and they were trespassing. My grandmother had every right to ask them to leave and when they didn't, she could have taken legal action. They are honestly lucky that she didn't. When Mark explained this to the individuals at the HOA, they said that they did have the right because I actually am overstepping onto land that they own. Somehow. These HOA idiots claim that they purchased a part of my land off of my neighbor, which obviously is not possible, but apparently they think that they can pull one over on me. About 2 weeks later, we received documents saying that they were going to sue us for damages to the property and for trespassing. The first thing I did was laugh, the second thing I did was forward the documents to the lawyer that my father had found. Then we both had a good chuckle about how stupid these a-holes at the HOA are. With a quick check of the deed in our filing cabinet, I could prove that they were wrong about the land being theirs. The lawyer contacted our old neighbor and asked him what was going on with them stating that he sold them our land, and he stated that he did not say anything of the sort. No surprise there. That is when I decided that I thought I would make a little expansion to my property. All of that adjacent land that they think they own can certainly be used for a different purpose. My son had been trying to talk me into raising a couple hundred chickens. Maybe this is the perfect time to let him prove himself as some kind of aspiring chicken farmer. The old barn in the back could be easily converted into a massive chicken coop. Then he could set up the outdoor run area in the last couple acres that ran behind the tiny mansion neighborhood and their annoying HOA. My son and I started the project and several weeks passed. Then one morning, when we went out to begin our day's work again, we realized that several of the fences we had put up for the chicken run had been cut down. That same week, the tractor that I had in my front pasture had 2 slashed tires. If you have ever seen a tractor tire, cutting one is not an easy feat. They are pretty damn thick and heavy. At this point, I am pissed. They come onto my property and mess with my equipment and fences. What's next? They are gonna set fire to something or what? In my state of fury, I painted "This is war" on a large flat piece of particle board and posted it facing the neighborhood for all of them to see. So now it is on. Not only am I definitely going through with this chicken farm idea my son wants to do, but I'm gonna throw a few pigs in here as well. Believe it or not, I had more land to my disposal further south, still pretty close to their neighborhood. If you have ever smelled a pig farm, it is one of the worst. Another month passed and I had the chickens set up and ready, pooping, clucking and laying eggs to their little heart's content. Then I had the pigs sent in after that, set up in the barn and fencing area. Damn, the smell was atrocious and it was not exactly awesome for us, but I certainly enjoyed knowing how pissed the HOA had to be over it. They still tried sending threatening letters, spewing nonsense left and right about suing us and so on and so forth. Eventually, the letters turned into bizarre apologies and annoying pleadings to buy my land off of me for an exorbitant amount of money. And I mean, hey, it was tempting, but really the best part was seeing the looks on their faces when they walked by on the jogging path. They were holding their noses and crying at the smell of all the animal manure. My son even had a great idea to create a huge compost pile for manure as well. We knew they would love that. The more they screwed with me, the worse I would make it, until eventually they just stopped sending me letters and did the best they could to ignore me. After about 9 months of them staring at my new chicken farm, compost pile and pigs, they decided to construct the biggest privacy fence they could between my land and theirs. I can't say I blame them, but my particle board sign is still standing, just in case they decide to mess with the bull again. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.